Okay. So now to the next program. First of all, this is the first lunchtime dialogue. Usually we do them, I call them the last dialogues, where the last stands for life, art, science, tech, to differentiate from the physical lasers. We see if we ever go back to normal lasers. This is the first lunchtime event, and so we welcome also some people from Europe. That's the advantage of doing things at this time. We are pleased to have two very creative composers. How do you call yourselves? I don't know, because you are unusual music composers. Heather Spence is a marine biologist and is joining us from the East Coast. And Cheryl Leonard is here in San Francisco. She makes music with objects she finds in places like Antarctica. I read the short bio for each one, very short. If you go to lasertalks.com, you can find the links to their website and longer bios. So Heather is a marine biologist and sound artist who combines science and art. She has taught courses on animal behavior, behavioral neuroendocrinology, which I had to Google to find out what it is, on sensation, perception, personality, etc. Her passive acoustic monitoring research program on the Mesoamerican Reef is featured in National Geographic's TV program, When Sharks Attack. She composes music inspired by and inspiring conservation, and performs internationally as a cellist and gambist. She currently advises on science and acoustics at the US Department of Energy and is co-leader of the Transdisciplinary Ocean Memory Project, which has its own website. Okay, I'll stop talking and we'll let Heather go, and then Cheryl will go next. And the speakers can decide if they want to take questions as they speak or later. Now, I'm going to mute myself and kill my video to give Heather the most bandwidth you can get. Okay? All yours, Heather.
Thank you. Let me get the tech going here. Oops, that's the end of the talk. Get a little preview. There we go. Well, thank you very much for joining in. And thank you for that excellent introduction. Very pleased to be here. So to begin, I invite all of you to take a moment to close your eyes. And as you do so, please think about what you are hearing and what words you would use to describe the sounds to yourself. Okay, you can open your eyes. Now I'd like you to think about what words you're using to describe what you're seeing to yourself. And to think about, does it feel more comfortable to you to describe what you see or to describe what you hear? So for me, I'm actually more comfortable with hearing than seeing. And when I hear words, I'm more oriented to the sound of them actually than the meaning of them. So when I feel emotions, I actually describe them with sound. And I write music for my friends to celebrate happy things or to commemorate sad things. It's basically how I express myself. And in fact, in giving this talk, I'm a little bit out of my element. It would be easier for me to write some music to convey what I have in mind rather than describe it in words, but I'm going to do my best. So as humans, we're very visually oriented, and this comes across even in our speech. Like we say, like, oh, see what I mean? But sound is really so important. Even when we close our eyes at night to sleep, we're still listening. And we use sound in so many ways to communicate ideas, emotions, diagnose medical issues, and we're all affected by noise. So people experience sound and noise differently and cope differently. One of my coping mechanisms is to compose music. So for me, making music is central to how I deal with and explore what's going on around me. And it is actually making music and my fascination with sound that led me to marine biology. I wanted to understand, how does sound work? So I studied musical instruments, I studied physics, I studied biology and bioacoustics, and that's what led me to a key moment when I started researching snapping shrimp. So what is a snapping shrimp? A snapping shrimp is this tiny little animal the size of your pinky finger. And yet it's responsible for the loudest sounds in shallow waters worldwide. This got me hooked on the ocean soundscape, and I decided I needed to study the ocean sounds and explore them both scientifically and musically. It turns out the ocean is a world of sound. It is full of different sounds, from shrimp to fish to dolphins to whales, physical sounds, waves, rain, eruptions, also human sounds like boat motors, sonar, construction. And as such, ocean ecosystems are adapted to a sonic world. Sound actually travels 4 times faster in water than in air. And the animals that live in the ocean evolved in that environment. So they rely on sound heavily for communication, cues, navigation, and they live in this interactive sound world where they both receive and produce sounds. So ocean ecosystems provide this really great, wide, varied source of inspiration for composing. And I think sometimes the ocean can seem a bit alien and inaccessible, but I hope that through my music, I can help connect with it. I can help other people connect with it better. So I view composing inspired by underwater soundscapes as a way to better tune into and better understand marine soundscapes and also soundscapes in general. And there are a number of ways to tackle this. One way is to directly incorporate recordings of underwater sounds into musical compositions. Another is to compose music inspired by sounds heard underwater, maybe particular rhythm or riff or melody. Another is to compose to address marine conservation themes. In any of these ways, I'm always striving to engage actively with audiences and performers and to highlight the importance of soundscapes for health and for survival. Basically, I'm composing all the time. In my head, at the piano, all the time. And some pieces I feel compelled to develop further to a recorded or written down phase. And in these, I look to inspire rather than prescribe how the performers and the listeners engage with the piece and what they take from it and what they do with it. To me, that's the kind of exciting part. People have told me that my music is fun to play, and that's really important to me. I think that if a performer is really engaged with the music, it makes for a more dynamic and exciting performance. So what I'd like to do now is I've chosen 5 example pieces in a variety of styles. And I'd like to play a 1-minute clip from each. That's about the shortest I could figure that I could do. One of the challenges of sound art versus visual art or visualizations. You know, with a visual, you can capture the essence of it almost immediately, but music has to occur over time. So we'll work with that. This first piece is a soundscape composition designed as an audio file to be consumed directly, and incorporates recordings of different watery bodies. Okay. We're going to move on to the next piece. You may have to adjust your audio levels on each of these. I tried to make them come across in Zoom, but Zoom is sometimes a little funny with audio. This next one is Reef Recall. So this is a soundscape composition, again, taking recordings, actual recordings, manipulating them. But in this case, I've added cello to kind of act as like an audio tour guide to help people tune in better to the key patterns, kind of highlight certain aspects. So here's a little segment from Reef Recall. This is the movement called Dolphin Divertimento. So what you were hearing there is actually recordings of dolphin vocalizations, both echolocation and communication sounds. It sort of strikes me as a lost opportunity that actually the voice of Flipper in the TV show is not an actual dolphin sound. It's actually a kookaburra call, which is a bird sped up. And I think that's a lost opportunity because dolphin sounds are really quite interesting and very varied. Oh, and I will mention if questions come up during the presentation, feel free to go ahead and ask them in the Q&A. If I notice it, I'll try and answer it. Or we can ask, or we can address it in the discussion afterwards. So Next, we come to a piece called Hydrophone Array. So in this one, there are no actual recordings incorporated into the piece, but the process of recording inspired the structure of the piece. So in this case, each of the performers is exhibiting a method of underwater sound recording. And in this case, this music was inspired by particular performers. So sometimes you take opportunities when they come. And in this case, I was doing a residency at the Drosy Resident Artist Program. And there was a flutist and physicist there who was quite virtuosic and could do some great extended techniques, which you're going to hear in this clip, where he's actually playing and singing and making percussive sounds all at the same time. And there was an oboe player who was also a dancer. So we also incorporated movement into this performance. So here is a sample of Hydrophone Array. So the next one, moving to another instrumental composition named Vale la Pena, which means in Spanish, is it worth it? So in this composition, the relationship to the marine environment is a little more abstract, and that this is actually exploring challenges of conflict resolution in marine conservation, and comes out of my experiences working in Mexico on the Mesoamerican reef. Oops. Okay, you might need to turn down your volume a little bit on this one. Okay, it occurs to me that now that I've mentioned viola da gamba a few times, it's not the most commonly known instrument. So cellos, people tend to have heard of, but actually here you can see a bass viola da gamba in this picture. It's kind of like a cross between a cello and a guitar. and it has frets like a guitar, but is bowed and held like a cello. It comes in different sizes. This is the large bass size. Okay. So the final clip that I'm going to share in this talk is from my recent CD release, Hear the Light. And this is from the track The People Shall Hear. So this includes vocals as well as instruments. And in this particular interpretation, this is a collaboration with Tina Chansey. And this explores environmental messages in biblical texts. Oh, and this might be, this also might be a little bit loud, so you might want to be prepared with your volume button. Great. So I hope that that gives you a sense of my process and work, just from some little snippets. Happy to delve further into influences or process as we when we get into our discussion. And as I close, I just want to really highlight that sound vibrates all around us and even inside us. And I'm really interested in figuring out how can we better interact with and appreciate our soundscapes. We live on an ocean planet. And if we want to connect with the earth, we need to connect with the ocean. So I'm looking forward to your questions. And at this point, let's open it up to discussion.
Can you tell us more? Can you tell us something about your musical education?
Can you say that again?
Can you tell us something about your musical education?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So so I studied. I started early on interested in piano. I didn't start off with a lot of formal music training. It was more kind of catch as I catch can. I would talk. I would after I would go to concerts, and afterwards I would sort of accost the musicians and and see if I could take some lessons in return for doing work with them, things of that nature. You know, I studied music, you know, in school as I could. But then when I got to college, I got a music scholarship for cello to university. But that scholarship didn't actually require me to major in music. So here I was imagining that, of course, I was going to be going into music, but that flexibility, this was at George Washington University, actually enabled me to make this discovery about the interesting sounds underwater. So I then pursued degrees in science that would allow me to study the science of sound and acoustics. So so I actually ended up majoring. I wanted to create my own major in acoustic biophysics, but then it turned out to be way too complicated. So I ended up studying biology and physics. Then I did a master's in marine biology, and I did my PhD mainly looking at acoustics and noise in dolphin habitats.
And a more difficult question. So you somehow ended up having a career that has to do with the sea, actually undersea, and and that inspires your music. Do you think if you had a different kind of job, I mean, is there something special about the sound of the sea? If you had a different kind of career, you think you would find the same inspiration in, I don't know, forests or mountains? Or is there something truly special about water?
For me, there's something truly special about water. And I think, so, I mean, and looking back, you know, yes, there was the moment that I realized, oh, I'm going to study underwater sound with the snapping shrimp. But even as a kid, you know, looking back now, I was really fascinated by that underwater world. The the sort of strangeness but familiarity of it. And I think it's you know, it's compelling personally to me, but I think it's also kind of compelling to all of us. It has this sort of magic and mystery, and it's such a huge part of our world. We don't see it every day, but we're so interconnected with the ocean, and it makes up such a huge part of our planet, and water is so essential to our very beings. I think even if I had gone a different direction, I think the ocean would have still pulled me to it.
Yeah, so it's not only that water is an obvious biological preeminence, but even culturally, even I mean, civilizations were born around rivers
Yes.
And the sea. I'm from Italy. The Mediterranean Sea was extremely important in shaping the civilizations there. So water has always been very important. In a sense, today you are privileged. Why? Because in the old days, if I think of my grandparents, they would, for them, a river was a normal sight, was a daily occurrence. The sound of the water was everywhere. And now we mostly live in cities. We in California live in a very dry area also. So we don't have that privilege anymore. We lost the contact with many of us have lost the contact with the sound of the water. So, oh yeah, interesting. So you have a question? You want to take it in the QA?
Sure, and I'll just say one more thing about that, because you mentioned about people and water kind of going together, civilizations through, you know, over time, and I think that's something that also I want to highlight is that, you know, people tend to live near water of some sort. And it's important to me that we study these areas and that interconnection of human society with the water that is so interconnected with it. And I think sometimes scientists kind of shy away from that because it's sort of messy and difficult to study ecosystems with people in it, but we need to in order to truly find sustainable solutions. We need to do that.
Yeah, now that you mentioned that, it would be fascinating if somebody had done a research about the influence of rivers and seas on classical music. That would be, I think, a fascinating study. Yeah. Anyway.
I see that there's a question.
Message to the audience. It's easier if you post questions under the QA, because I see also things under the chat, which I'm going to read now. Okay, you answer the question.
Oh, should I read the one in the Q&A? I see I'm assuming kilowatts might not be somebody's real name, but if it is, that's awesome. Has Heather explored incorporating visuals with her sound compositions? Yes, though maybe not as much as I should. So for example, in that one piece, I didn't show a video because sometimes that's strange with Zoom and we didn't have a lot of time, but the piece hydrophone array actually has some movements that go along with it. And so there's that aspect. I have played created sounds for visual performances and art pieces. So for dance, I've created soundscapes and compositions for dance. Also for, I did a piece, for example, for a sculpture. And the issue with the sculpture is that in order to be lit, there needed to be a generator to provide the power for it. And so it was supposed to be this serene sculpture, but there was this generator sound. So, and this was sculpture by Javier Tejerina. So I created a soundscape to harmonize with the sound of the generator so that people could feel calm while viewing the sculpture. But I've been thinking about doing more with like videos, especially now with COVID, where we're doing so much virtually. It's something I'd like to get into more because I think sometimes, because people tend to be rather visual, it sometimes helps people connect with sounds if there's a visual to go with it. So maybe I'll get more into videos.
Yinan had a question in the chat. What would dolphins and marine life think of your music mixes?
That is something that I'm also interested in, is how do different animals perceive sounds. So one of the things that I'd like to do is work on more of how to harmonize soundscapes for marine animals that are experiencing noise, how to like lessen the stress. Now, the pieces that I've written that are instrumental are designed for human ears, right? If I was going to design it for a particular marine animal, I would design it with their particular hearing ranges and the particular frequencies and rhythms that they're tuned into. Now, the actual recordings of snapping shrimp, I think marine animals would be into that because that's something that they hear a lot of.
Okay, you have another question in the QA.
Okay. Okay, from Ivan Amato. Heather, I'm fascinated by those density corridors in the sea in which sound can travel thousands of miles. Can you get access to sound there, or is that only in the hands of, say, the DoD? I would love to hear whatever pastiche of sound travels there ambiently. Yeah, so like the SOFAR channels, I think are what you're referring to. So there are these kind of, we call them channels, but they're really more like layers. In which they allow the sound to echo around in there, and so they can travel long distances. Yes, so there are ways that we could tap into those sounds. Yes, the Department of Defense definitely has an interest in recording sounds. We can't get access to all of that, but there are plenty of listening stations that we can get access to. So that is very much within the realm of possibility. I'd love to do more with that. I've worked on some ideas about the SOFAR channel in a more abstract way through some immersive installation work, but I'd love to work on that more.
Now I have a question for both of you. Heather, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, next project. Heather, what's your next project?
Oh, well, I have a ready answer for that one. So in addition to my role with the Ocean Memory Project, I have a grant that I received from the National Academy's Keck Futures Initiative as a collaboration with the now late Mark Ballora, who's known for his work in sonification. So this was meant to be a project that we would be doing together. Now I'm carrying on our vision, and it's a project that does, so sonification is like visualization of data, but with sound. So this is actually going to be doing sonification of data that is ocean data and sound data. So it's going to be sonifying sound data to look at patterns to examine ecosystem health through music and sonified data. So that's called Layers of Meaning, and that will be forthcoming.
Okay, excellent. And thank you very much for joining us from the East Coast.